Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to class. In continuation to what we have already been discussing about languages in India and languages of India, we have established this fact that India is a truly pluricultural, multilingual society. Multilingualism in India is not exception, but it's a norm. And an average Indian is multilingual. And when we say an average Indian is multilingual, it confirms to all understanding on multilingualism, number of codes or varieties the person speaks in different socio-cultural spaces. So with all those definitions and accepted idea of multilingualism, an average Indian qualifies for this multilingualism notion, and India is truly a multilingual country. In our previous videos and discussions, we talked about the census data 2011, and we saw the number of returns people have returned as their mother tongue. And if you look at the census data from 1961, 71, 81, 1991, 2001, and finally 2011, which is available now, the assertion of mother tongue with different names and designations is in ascending order. So it is increasing. For example, in 2011 census, you have more than 15,659 or something like that returns, raw returns. So, we look at the domains like home, streets, bazaars, school, formal domains like education, administration, governance. You find a very swift and flawless movement and shift from one code to the other by the same individual. And it is a wonderful phenomenon that we find in Indian context, in Indian ecology. Language has never been a barrier in mixing in socio-cultural spaces. So we are going to talk about this beautiful phenomenon and plural phenomenon called multilingualism in context of India. I was referring to census data 1961 and again 1981 and 1991, why they are important. If you look at the facts and figures of this data, you will understand the complexity, at the same time a coexistence of all these languages, right, without any conflict. So multilingualism doesn't portray any kind of challenge in Indian context in mixing, communicating and sharing. Firstly, let us look at the data. Some deductions that we can make out of 1961, 81 and 1991's census survey, census data available to us. So in 1961, census returned 1652 mother tongues and classified them under 193 languages. I will come to each of these figures later on. Let us quote the data from the census. And these 193 languages, distribution of these 193 languages, that census data 1961 gives us is Austric group of languages. 20 languages are listed in that group. Dravidian languages 20 languages are listed in that group. Tibeto-Burma languages, 98 languages are listed in that group, and Indo-Aryan languages, 54 languages are listed in that group. In 1961 census, 91% of the total population surveyed spoke one of the 15 scheduled languages, and this number rose to 95.58% in the 1981 census. And just to remind you about scheduled languages, if you recall, in our lecture on scheduled languages of India, we talked about the constitutional provision and Schedule 8. That is a true statutory acknowledgement of pluricultural, multilingual India, where this provision has listed 14 languages on 26th January 1950 when we adopted our constitution, and the list keeps on increasing. Today, as I'm talking, in 2021, we have 22 languages listed in the schedule, official languages. So Schedule 8 lists official languages other than Hindi and English in this list. So, 1% of the total population in 1961 spoke one of the languages from the scheduled languages, such a huge population. And this number of the mother tongue or the native speakers of scheduled languages rose to 95.58% in 1981 census. In 1991 census, the raw returns of the mother tongue came to 10,400, right? So from 1652, we moved to 10,400. This is a remarkable number because we find a decline, okay? And they were further classified, and we arrived at 1576 rationalized mother tongues and 1796 names which were treated as unclassified, right? And in 1991 census, the native speakers of scheduled languages rose to 96.29%. And this growth can be understood in terms of the fact that some more languages were added to Schedule 8. And by that we had 85 mother tongues grouped under Schedule 8 of the scheduled languages, and 131 languages grouped under non-scheduled languages, right? 96 non-other scheduled languages. But this figure changes dramatically if we look at 2011 census. And if you look at statement 9 of the census of India 2011, it has 5 language families, right? Indo-European, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, Tibeto-Burmese, and Semitic Hamitic languages. Number of languages grouped under each of the families, we find 21 in Indo-Aryan languages, then 17 in Dravidian languages, 14 in Austroasiatic languages, and 66 in Tibeto-Burman languages families. So you can see the shifting numbers. If you go to the previous slide, what you see, 20 Austric or Austroasiatic that we call it, Dravidian 20, which has come to 17 in 2011 census, Tibeto-Burman 98 languages, and Indo-Aryan 54 languages, which now in 2011 census we find only 21, because a vast majority of languages are listed under Hindi, right, a major language which is our official language as well. So this shifting happens and the number varies. But what is important is that 78% of the total population, which amounts to 94 crores 50 lakhs 52,555. This size of population speaks one of the languages from Indo-Aryan family. Then a distant group, which is Iranian Germanic, negligible percentage. But in Dravidian family, what we see, 19.64% of the population of India speaks one of the Dravidian languages listed. Total number is 17, and the total number goes to 23 crores 78 lakhs 40,116. If you go to a distant percentage, that is Austroasiatic, only 1.11% speak one of the languages listed in Austroasiatic family, and only 1.01% of the total population of India in 2011 spoke one of the languages listed in Tibeto-Burman. And mind you, from 96, 98, we moved to 66 only in Tibeto-Burman families in 2011 census. So this is the diversity, state of diversity of languages and societies in the country. So we see the shifting number of speakers, claimants, and the raw returns 10,400 to 2021. 2011 census. We find huge shift from 10,000 plus languages to 15,000 plus languages. A huge increase of 5,000 new designations returned as mother tongue. And that talks about the linguistic identity issues and the tendency of asserting their linguistic identity, right? So that gives you a broad picture of number of varieties, languages, you call them mother tongues, you call them varieties, codes spoken in this country. So India speaks in many languages and writes in many scripts. And this diversity has never been a problem in free mixing, sharing, and communicating with each other. We have already talked about official languages of India and the story of Hindi emerging as official language and English as associate official language. We have already discussed it in our other video. There are other sources which list number of languages and varieties spoken in this country. So, for example, one of the sources like People's Language Survey of India, carried out between 2010 and 2013, identifies 780 languages. So, Census of India 2011 identifies only 121 languages, where 22 languages are listed in the 8th schedule. There are scheduled languages and 99 non-scheduled languages. So, Government of India and its census of 2011 gives us a data of 121 languages spoken in the country, where 22 in the scheduled list and 99 in the non-scheduled list. But here, the People's Survey of India gives us 780 languages, right? So, this categorization and listing of languages in different categories is more of prescriptive, and it has an artificial intervention. Mind you that only those languages are listed and surveyed and put in different class which have more than 10,000 speakers. The census data does not talk about languages less than 10,000 speakers. So that's a different socio-political debate. We'll talk about it in some other lecture. Another data source, Ethnologue, which is a global database, gives us a different number, where it says that in 2019, 453 living languages in India, right? And India has the fourth highest number of languages in the world. So it is interesting. So the numbers are not reliable. Depends which source you refer to, you get a different number. But one thing is for sure, that we have a pluricultural, multilingual society that speaks in many languages. A truly multilingual society which has 5 language families, right? Indo-Aryan is the largest family, and 2011 census says more than 78% of the people of India speak one of the languages from Indo-Aryan family, Hindi being at the top, the highest spoken language in the country. Now, if you look at the ability of the common average Indian speaker or user of language, he is at least a bilingual, at least a bilingual. Vast majority of them are multilingual. But this ability or this bilingualism or multilingualism does not stand in contrast and opposition to each other, but it is complementary in nature. It complements, and it's truly multilingual and multicultural in the sense that we have a range of ethnicity, different cultures, scores of languages spoken, and a wide range of religions followed. So it's a truly diverse country with multilingual speakers who have access to multiple linguistic repertoire, verbal repertoire. However, their ability to speak many languages is not seen as deficit, the linguistic deficit. Instead, each of these linguistic repertoire or the codes complement each other, right? And a speaker seamlessly moves from one code to other, from one situation to other, or in one socio-cultural space from to the other socio-cultural space. So this does not become a hindrance, an obstacle, or a challenge, which is very difficult for an European or Western societies to understand, because multilinguality or multilingualism in India is very normal and it is all over. It's a high degree of multilingualism, right? So an individual uses a particular language at home, another in the streets, in the bazaar, another in the certain formal domains as education, administration, and so on. So possibly a person born in North knows Bhojpuri and uses Bhojpuri at home, or Braj at home, or Awadhi at home, and Khadi Boli or what you call Hindustani on the streets. Then Hindi and English in school and university, and of course Hindi and English in administration and formal domains. If he enters into higher education, if he goes to administration, civil services, and judiciary, science and technology, so English becomes prominent. So look at that person, a common person coming out of a Braj speaking family, Awadhi speaking family, Bhojpuri speaking family, has equal competence in Hindi and English, at least 3 languages. And same is true with anyone from, let's say, Tamil Nadu, anyone from Andhra, anyone from Karnataka. A person may be speaking Tulu at home, and some dominant regional language like Tamil or Telugu in the street, in the bazaars or informal setups, maybe speaking English in school and college, and to a great degree of command on Hindi for other functional purposes. So take an example of, let's go to Mizoram, let's go to Arunachal, A person may be from Tibeto-Burman area, a person may be speaking Adi language at home, maybe speaking Hindi on the streets and for other administrative purposes, and English in education or formal domains as a contact language. So an average Indian is multilingual. Take example from any nook or end corner of the country, right? So it's very common to have a person with mastery in his or her home language, of course, first language, then a regional or state language, which is a dominant language used in the region, if it is different from home language, and for international and national mixing and accessibility to the opportunities, the person may be knowing Hindi and of course English as a language. So average Indian is multilingual by nature, and multilingualism is in our DNA. This is very common and frequent, and it is complementary. So when you travel from one domain to the other, you move seamlessly from one core to the other, and you have equal mastery. And this is the story of all common Indians. And if you are educated, English is added to your repertoire, and you become proficient in English as well. So this is a very common phenomena. Now, why this Kothari Commission is important? Because if you want to understand the education system vis-a-vis linguistic realities, Kothari Commission was formed on 14th July 1964, and on 29th June 1966, Kothari Commission was dissolved after it achieved its objective, by giving its report. And the Commission recommended adopting a 3-language formula at state levels. This was the first commission of its kind which came up with this idea of 3-language formula, and that is an acknowledgement, a true acknowledgement of the multilingual fabric of the country. And this 3-language formula became the rock bed, very strong pillar in framing policy in education in India. And if you look at new education policy, there is no deviation. We continue with the similar assertion and acknowledgement of multilingualism in the country, in our education system as well. And it intended to promote a language of the southern state in Hindi speaking states and Hindi in southern states, non-Hindi speaking states. It intended to promote Hindi, English and a regional language in non-Hindi speaking states, and Kothari Commission recommended promoting regional languages, Sanskrit as well as international languages, preferably English, in the school curriculum. Right? So it was a true reflection of the social practices and the society, multilingual society, that we adopted in our education as well. So what is 3-language formula? The need for Kothari Commission, the objective of Kothari Commission is to come up with an uniform policy across the country in education, because there was no uniform teaching system across the country. So we wanted to have a framework, and Kothari Commission's recommendations are important in that way. So Hindi was the general medium of instruction in the north, regional languages and English were the media of instructions in other parts, non-Hindi states of the country. This led to chaos and created difficulties for interstate communication and mobility of learners and workers. Therefore, in order to uniformize the system, in 1968, new education policy was derived and a middle path was agreed upon, which is called trilingual formula, three language formula, whatever you call it, and given by Kothari Commission. So it was adopted. So for students in the non-Hindi states, it mandated lessons in English, Hindi, and a regional language. Right. So what was the use of it? Why? What was the implicit objective in this trilingual formula? So the Kothari Commission tried to achieve three objectives uh, in order to minimize the linguistic tension and promote linguistic harmony. They accommodated group identity, so linguistic identity, and they were accommodated, right? It was an attempt to affirm national unity and also increase efficiency in administration. Next policy framework that we have in 1986, NPE 1986, it did not do anything to this idea originally promoted by 1968 language education policy, and they adopted the three language formula verbatim without any change. And if you look at 2020 NEP, now it is called NEP, National Education Policy. So it's no more new education policy, it's National Education Policy, NEP 2020, right? So in this new policy framework also, we have not deviated from the idea of multilingual fabric of the country. We have maintained that. In addition, it has been elaborated and it has become more accommodative. And if I may quote particular things about this policy, when it comes to medium of instruction, this new policy says, wherever possible, right, the medium of instruction until at least grade 5, but preferably till grade 8 and beyond, will be the home language or mother tongue or the local language or the regional language. And it's a big accommodating change that we see in 2020 policy. We may debate the effectiveness of it. We may debate how we are going to implement it. We may debate lack of resources. We may debate lack of teachers for implementing this policy. But if you look at the nature of the policy, if you look at the intent of the policy, it is more plural, accommodating, and underlining the multilingualism in the country. The three language formula will continue to be implemented while keeping in mind the need to promote multilingualism as well as promote national unity. NEP 2020 also stated that there will be a greater flexibility in the three language formula and no language will be imposed on any state. So it gives a lot of autonomy, because education is a state subject, and it gives a lot of autonomy to implement that. The three languages learned by children will be choice of the states, regions, and of course the students themselves, so long as at least two of the three languages are native to India. So you can see a consistency in the policy from 1968 to 1986 and now 2020. I'm not going to talk about the challenges of implementing this policy. That is a separate debate. But what is important to underline here is the statutory acknowledgement of multilingualism in the country. At the same time, the firm belief that multilingualism is not a challenge for free mixing, sharing, and communicating, but in fact, it is complementary. Also, it is Schedule 8, and such policies are declaration of the fact that languages enjoy equal respect. Of course, there can be debate about the minor languages which are not listed, minor languages which are not listed in the census data, or those languages which are grouped under one regional major language. So, there are other aspects of it. But overall, if you look at the multilingual picture of India, if you look at the linguistic ecology of India, it's very rare in the world to find 5 different families, scores of languages, and the aspirations of speakers of these languages, which is growing every day, in the sense that in 61, 7 and 81 you find 10,400 entries as mother tongues, and in 2011 you find more than 15,000. So we survive through ages in this multilingual ecology, and all the languages present in the country, right, belong to this linguistic ecology, and they are complementary. Perhaps we'll talk about in some of the classes about language contact and variation. I'll also highlight these things where languages are continuously in contact with each other, exchanging with each other, interacting with each other, and the change happens in both directions, and the changes survive, become in gain high currency in practice, and languages change. We have linguistic changes, we have as the society changes, right. We'll talk about minor languages. UNESCO also gives us a list of endangered languages in the country. So we'll talk about language vitalization and language documentation in some of the lectures. But for today, we understand that India is a truly multilingual, pluricultural country, a society where it speaks in multiple languages, it writes in multiple scripts. At the same time, it continues and sustains and continues to be a truly multilingual society, and we have a very high degree of linguistic harmony. There are certain tensions in certain parts, there are certain linguistic tensions in the parts, but perhaps we'll talk about them later on. But the fact is that we have a composite culture, we have a composite society, despite the fact that we have multiple languages and multiple cultures. So, this is it for now in multilingualism in India. We have to remember that an average Indian, look at you for that matter, and you see how many languages you are exposed to, how many languages you have mastered. Look at your home language. If your language is not the language of the state you are in, you have a different home language, you have a dominant state language, regional language, you have access to Hindi, good in Hindi for all functional purposes, and of course you have good command on English. You are a multilingual. You are not simply a bilingual, you are a multilingual. And look at the ease of doing business, where you move from one domain to the other domain, from your home to the streets, to the market, to the school, to college, and finally job. You move from one domain to other, and you see how seamlessly you switch from one code, one variety, one language to the other. This is wonderful. It can look like an amazing thing for Western society, but for us, it is a very common, natural thing. So common and so natural that we hardly pay any attention to it. And we become so proficient user of all these codes together. Not only that, you also see that the level of proficiency in each code, each variety, each language. Possibly, you may not speak a particular language, but you understand it. You have accessibility to that society, you have accessibility to that culture, right? So, it is a continuum, linguistic continuum, and it is very common and very prolific in nature. So, with this is it for now in this particular topic, multilingualism in India. However, it gives us so many other topics and themes to talk about, which we'll do in our subsequent lectures and videos. Thank you very much for now.